Hi, my name is Sherry Kinnersley, a student working towards my continuing administration license at Concordia University. Today I'm excited to share with you some of my key experiences from my practicum and what I learned during the process. Competency 1 is visionary leadership. The project I took on here was to work with advanced ed and accreditation visits. I selected this activity because it would help me begin looking at high schools and school systems from a different perspective. It allowed me to observe, collect evidence, and then rate a school based on a rubric of best practices. It began to put into focus what we read and learn about in education reform articles or in workshops from experts. And it allowed me to clearly see the strengths and challenges in my own building as well as the high school system district-wide. As I began to evaluate what I would change in my own leadership within my own building, I could also start to envision the changes I would make at the district level. During this experience, I became a certified evaluator and participated in a number of accreditation visits across the state. These accreditation visits included a team of educators coming to a school and spending a day doing classroom observations, interviewing stakeholders such as students, teachers, parents, community members, administrators, and reviewing artifacts, lots and lots of artifacts, in order to evaluate the school based on the 5 standards listed here. Once we came to an evaluation score, we also made recommendations for future improvement. Each of these visits were a great learning experience for me individually, and collectively they taught me a lot about change leadership. While working on this entry, I learned that leaders that are working towards real change have to see it as a continuous work in progress. This isn't a one-time initiative that's going to fix everything or just a reform effort that we're adding to a list of other initiatives. The change needs to be substantial. It will need a vision, and it will need a leader that's creating a shared vision with district leaders, faculty, administration, and community. So everyone knows where they're going, the value of that goal, and is on board to work towards that goal. Competency 2 is instructional improvement. In my 5th year as an administrator, I keep coming back to the fact that feedback is where I want to improve. I want to improve personally in the feedback that I provide teachers, and I want to increase the amount of feedback that teachers are giving students and they're giving each other, and to have that continuous improvement conversation and feedback going all the time in a building. The first project I did was the Teachscape certification project, and I included the Teachscape program because it allowed me to participate and train and test in a nationwide movement to better collect evidence of teaching and learning during classroom observations, and then without bias or added interpretation, assign a score based on a rubric. This is central to what we do in schools, and it really helped me in the evaluation process see clearly what was going on there, knowing what I should be focusing on, taking out the habits that we have of wanting to interpret what's going on, but looking at it just at face value and giving better feedback. The second opportunity I had was the classroom walkthrough project. I began this work because I wanted to be an instructional leader, and I'm always surprised by how much of our day is spent in everything but the learning that happens in the classroom. So I wanted to make sure that I was building a system that would help that conversation be ongoing with everyone in the building as much as possible. So I created, after a COSA conference and some accreditation visits and some research, a walkthrough model where groups of teachers could do peer observations. They would collect data and wonderings for what they saw, provide that feedback to the teacher, and then there was a process in which to do that so that they could reflect on that and hopefully increase the amount of professional inquiry that's going on in the building. I also wanted us to use it as a way to highlight those high leverage strategies that we're using in our building, to identify culturally responsive practices that we're starting so that hopefully they could spark and spread through the building. I wanted to increase the amount of collaboration so that teachers weren't just working in isolation, that we had a common goal to work together to improve the learning of our students. The third competency is effective management. The 2013-14 school year was a tumultuous one in Portland, with ongoing negotiations on the teacher's contract. The activity I'm including here is the leadership meeting that was scheduled the week before the proposed strike date. This was our opportunity to learn the systemic plans the district had made for the event of a strike. And then we would work collectively at our grade level groups to work out our plans and determine how we would collectively work together to reopen high schools in the event of a strike. Throughout this experience, I learned really 3 big lessons that will stay with me for the rest of my career. The first is the importance of listening. As the year progressed, the stress levels in every aspect of the building, teachers, support staff, students, parents, it increased exponentially. And it was so important just to listen, listen, listen. All of these needed to be vented, and each individual had to feel heard and that we were there to support them. The second one was that administrators need to stick together and support one another. Over the months of negotiations, we learned that administrators alone in buildings needed our collective support so that everyone had a shoulder to lean on and someone that would have their back. The third one was that districts cannot work in isolation. As we were coming up with plans for how to reopen schools and support our students and our families if there was a strike, we were reaching out to districts that were in the process at the moment and some that had gone through the process to figure out how we could better serve our students. The next one, competency 4, is inclusive practices. For this one, I worked on at a parent academy. When I started at Lincoln, I knew that there was a huge majority population in a very white culture. A large part of my day was spent working with students of color from socioeconomic backgrounds or others that just did not feel part of this culture and as a result couldn't engage in their education. So I set about to build systems within my school that would better engage students and parents and make that connection with school. The first thing I did was to find the FTE to hire an attendance monitor and an equity specialist. And they really worked to identify these students and work to build confidence and connection so that they could re-engage. But knowing that the process will only work with strong relationships between home and school, I quickly realized that I would need a bilingual community agent to reach out to our families that feel that language is a barrier between them and our school. With those 3 in place, we were able to put out fires, but we couldn't be proactive. So our next step in the next following year was that we set up to build a Saturday parent academy. And the parent academy would work with parents, students, families, community members to really delve into those aspects of education that might not be as transparent as all of us in the field think it is. So how do we help you build your student schedule? How do we help you monitor those transcripts and work towards getting your child to graduation? How do we help you with the college application process if your student is going to be a first-generation college-bound student? Just making sure that we are serving all families. The 5th competency is ethical leadership. And for this, I focused on equity. Equity in education, to me, is a school that is opening doors for each and every student. It is a school that realizes that equal inputs do not necessarily guarantee equitable outputs and student achievement. And it is a school that realizes that each and every student will need different types of support to reach their personal potential. To do this work, I went at it on 2 fronts. One was an action step. So during my practicum, I began taking a leadership role with our CARE team, which stands for Collaborative Action Research for Equity. And this team was working to learn more about culturally responsive practices and really start implementing them in the classroom and building a classroom environment that was built relationships with students, provided relevant and real curriculum, and provided rigor for everyone. The second aspect of this equity work that I did was realizing that as a leader, I need to be the person who's keeping it in focus for everybody, and it should be a topic or brought up in every conversation. And when I'm looking in a class, always keeping this in the center of my mind. I realized I needed to learn more also. So I attended a Beyond Diversity training. The second option to go deeper into the work. And this really let me delve into and examine my beliefs about race and how it exhibits itself in my daily work and at the district and its impact on the achievement gap. Competency 6 is socio-political. I did 2 activities here. The first one was to work with stakeholders across the district. And I included this activity because as I've been working in administration, it has become clear that at every level of this work, it is important to engage stakeholder groups, listen to their concerns, and get ahead of issues. During this experience, I sought out opportunities to engage in a wide variety of populations across the district, whether it was celebrating, whether it was negotiating contracts, whether it was talking about boundaries. I wanted to be in those conversations and make sure that I was understanding how we can better support communities. The second aspect I did was the State of Oregon Proficiency Grant Committee. The State of Oregon a couple years ago put out a grant opportunity for schools and districts that wanted to move the work of proficiency forward. I participated on a panel that reviewed the grants, that evaluated them, and then made the recommendations to the Department of Education. This was an eye-opening experience for me. And throughout my years in education, I've always been adamant about wanting to maintain a position in schools and with as much interactions with students as possible. This situation, and really all the situations that I found myself in my practice